listening to the Tech Alliance podcast, or the TAP for short. My name is Marina.
And I'm Andre.
In the first episode, we had an interview with Ariana Maschiato talking about partnering with startups. However, we had a thought that the topic could be developed, so the startups can receive even more advice on how to partner with larger companies.
Yeah, in fact, that feels like that was ages ago. It was not even the first episode, it was the first season. And now we're well into second season, and we have an expert guest on just the topic today. Please meet Mikel Mangold, the head of Partnerships EMEA at CyberProtonics. Hi, Mikel.
Hi, I'm very happy to be here, Andre and Marina. Looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, me too. Can you tell our listeners a bit more about yourself?
Yeah, and I will start with how I landed with this topic, which is partnerships and alliances and ecosystem. Today, I'm a huge fan of it. I think it's the future, but I started actually with chemistry. I studied it for 6.5 years. And I was already frustrated back then that it was siloed. Research department were not collaborating. But right after my studies, I was able to work in a startup incubator and a startup accelerator in Silicon Valley, working for Bayer. And basically that pushed me to the topic of how do you help these startups collaborate with our firm? And that led me to meet a lot of stakeholders of the industry, meet expert leading $1 billion fund to build startup ecosystem, to interact with a lot of partnership professional across, different continents. And I led myself up an innovation initiative later on in a Japanese company. Today, I wrote a book about it, and my book was about mindset, but I freshly joined a startup, cybersecurity startup from Silicon Valley, but I'm based in Berlin, called CyberProtonics. And my goal is to help our company to really go fast on the market and scale, and then almost entirely through partners. So I'm excited to be part of this company doing that and happy to share some of the insights I gained over the years.
The path is so impressive. You are an expert. Building a partnership from scratch for a new company is a huge challenge. So, where to start? Is it better to choose a proven framework or to follow the path intuitively?
Yeah, no, thank you very much for asking. And I think, I'm in the shoes of that person right now that is like, all right, we want to build partnerships. And then you say, how do we start? And we often look at, the biggest companies out there doing this incredible work, like Microsoft is generating 95% of their revenue to partners. And so we want to replicate their model, or we want to be the Salesforce. And then we quickly realized that it's not a good strategy to start from the end. And so let's think about person starting from zero. First of all, you're not alone. And it's a new industry. 2% in 2020 where we'll say network-based business model, which is like, selling or with partners. And we are going to 25% in 2030. So you can imagine that the industry is not that mature to know how to work with partners. So the good news is that there is no perfect path. There is not like a magical formula, but rather many, and I would say the one that is right for you. And so I looked at a lot of databases. I talked to many. And a big learning that I found out is that you're going to basically build the first partner with a very simplistic way, and then you evolve from there based on whatever you want. I took several trainings to understand how to start, one from Northwest Kellogg University, and then another one, a certification by Association Strategic Alliance Professional. And the reason I actually citing this is because I do like their framework. So they are helping companies to build alliances for over 30 years, and they're teaching this 7-step framework, which I will cite now. So the number one is internal strategy. You have to clarify internally what you're looking after. What do you want? What are your own KPI to achieve, something? The number two is analysis and selection. Once you find out what you actually want, and because, you have a KPI to achieve, you build an IPP, ideal partner profile, and then you look at the industry. Where are they? What's the IPP? And once you scout, then you analyze, and then you select, right? I think one of the big mistakes is that many are just collaborating right away with the one next door. And I think it needs actually more work and more analysis and maybe a bigger selection before actually selecting your first or third partner, because they are going to be a big part of your very short success. The third step was to building trust. And how do you build trust? Is you make sure that you and your partner align on what you want to achieve. There's a win-win situation to be established, that there's actually put on paper under a memorandum of understanding. And then there's really like deliverables, a timeline, governance, who is going to be part of it, resources that both companies are to put into it. When that is achieved, you can move to the next step, which is operational planning. And this is really like going on the ground and starting to work on, this partner. And that can be very quickly done, and always thinking that we are in an agile world now, so you can change, but it's important to start and have a middle point and an end point, and then you iterate and you review results. So the sixth step is launch and manage. When all of that is planned, you do that, you analyze, and then last step, which is very important as well, is that you can end the partnership gracefully or innovate, right? So either it grows in scale or you exit. And I think that's why a lot of industry don't like to say partnership, but alliance is a bit maybe better, because sometimes we think that partnership has to be together forever, but alliance, it's actually okay to stop it, right? And it depends on the company's need. If it changes, it's okay to exit. And I think that's the key last step is, if it doesn't succeed well, if it's not achieving its KPI, or it doesn't have its relevancy anymore, it's time to exit. So that's, I would say, the 7 steps that many are providing, other partnership professional are posting. And I will even cite the starter pack by, I think Nelson Wang is his name, a person that has done 15 years of partnership. I love his kit, starter pack for partnership. It's amazing, steps to follow. And if that is not fitting to your need, you have to find the one that is in your field that is doing similar things.
Mikel, that makes sense to me.
Thank you. It was a very good idea or framework, a very easy and clear one for a startup.
I do want to summarize a little bit, because there was a lot that we got from you, Mikel. And I think, first of all, you can certainly tell straight away that you literally wrote a book about this stuff. So that's very impressive. The key things that stood out for me that I hear about from various sources, and I want our listeners to pay close attention to, is having your goals clearly in mind, having an exit strategy, or at least being aware of the fact that you can exit a partnership. And what Mikel has mentioned, if you missed it, IPP, Ideal Partner Profile. Remember that it exists. I've seen in my own experience and another's experience, way too often people skip that stage and then become a little bit surprised by failing at establishing partnerships. So let's get to the next question that's kind of flowing from what we've been discussing so far. Now, if you're in a position of a startup, right, that is just discovering for itself the value and the potential of partnerships, what resources and tools would you recommend to manage and to optimize partnerships?
Oh, it's a very good one. So when we start and we follow, let's say this 7-step process or other processes, at the beginning, tools is not the most important, right? I think that the most important is this internal alignment and communication. But when it comes to tool, I think we are now in a time which is incredible how much value and insights you can gain from these new tools, and they really didn't exist 10 years ago. First, I highly recommend, and actually I'm giving a lot of workshops and teaching, because I think this is mandatory almost for any company and individual to have a CRM. Why is a CRM so important? I could talk about it an hour, but in short, is you add data relevant to each of the stakeholders you engage with. You segment it, you add a score to it, and so you can actually prioritize your most engaged, your most relevant stakeholder contacts. And I think this is really the number one that I highly recommend to every startup founder. But once internal strategies is aligned, IPP is aligned, you put that into the CRM, and then you can start to see, okay, which type of, first of all, this comes back to the strategy, type of partnership that I want to do. And then you can build, your funnel about scouting, evaluating, prioritizing, and you can do all of that in a CRM. And I'm going to mention the one that I'm, a big fan of, which is HubSpot, but obviously you have other ones. And you can do that, all of it in the CRM. So don't skip the Excels and start to work there. Now, once you are a bit more advanced in your partnership journey, you start to have 3 or 4 partners, right? At the beginning, it's not a big deal. You put a drive and you work like that with partners. But once you get a bit more advanced, obviously you need a communication channel with the partner. Maybe it is Slack. Maybe it is another one. Maybe it's a Teams and so on. But Slack is quite nice because it's across different, software provider like Microsoft or Google and so on. The other one that I highly recommend, which I also became a fan of, is this kind of account-based account mapping tools. And what that is that to go, and prioritize your partner and see which one is the most relevant to you. How do you know that, right? It's not just about do you like this person, but do they have common customers? Do they have customers that you want? Do they have alignment into the things you do? And you can find that with a software tool like Reveal Crossbeam. By the way, they announced yesterday that they merged, and this is also highly relevant to do this counting step 2 that we talked before. After that, so once you negotiate and you get a lot of help to do this MOU and you start to do this operational planning, and you have 4 to 5 partners already minimum, you can think about how are you going to track, how are you going to do the health check, how are you going to measure? There is, and if we go to the failure later in this podcast, we can maybe touch base later. But I think there's a big problem where data is not tracked about the progress. And then you come after the quarter and you don't know what to say to your manager, leader, or executives. And then you don't get resources to advance it. And this is often leading to failure. So you need a partner, a PRM, which is basically tracking all the things you do with your partner, activities, revenues, marketing, more. And with these kind of different tools, CRM, you have this account mapping tool, PRM, and actually you have other ones. You can combine all the data you need to show the progress you're doing. And I think 10 years ago, there was not these tools. You couldn't do it really much. They advanced so fast that it's almost a mistake to not use them. So I think it's a big one. And happy to go deeper now in the topic of how do you engage and how to prioritize corporates. But I will wait on your next question.
All right. So we talked a little bit about the resourcing and the tools. It does sound a little bit daunting to me to recommend to a startup to invest in this kind of tooling upfront, but I feel like I have to agree with you, Mikel. Like this kind of investment, first of all, you don't have to sell your house to start with a basic package on one of these tools, and you can certainly try before you buy quite a few of them. So check it out, right, and do yourself that service of setting yourself up with the right kind of tooling up front. You will save yourself a lot of headache in the long run.
And on this, Andre, I just want to add, so you have services like Secret. It's like a startup tip. It's a platform where you can find 90% discounts of some of these tools. I do encourage that the free version, you can do a ton of it. You can kind of escape paid version for a lot of the reasons. And once you're ready to really use the premium features, then it's time to invest a bit. As you said, maybe it's not the most important right away, but there are solutions around it.
Nice. So there's going to be a link in the description. But talking about resourcing, like this is a related topic, but somewhat switching the gears. When you put yourself in the shoes of a startup with somewhat limited resources, how would you recommend, probably being somewhat on the other side here, how would you recommend that a startup negotiates with the larger partner in a partnership in an ecosystem? What's the right approach?
No, I like these questions, and I'm being in the shoes of, and I'm in a startup right now. I have to see which partners we want. And it's funny because we always like brands that we know, right? I want to work with Cisco. I want to work with Apple. I want to work with Microsoft. Yes. And it looks good on paper. But I think I learned from the founder of the startup I'm right now, part of, which is launched 15 startups, sold 6 of them, he said, they are not for now, they are for later. And I think this is very important. And I've seen other startups doing the mistake to prioritize small accounts initially. You don't want to start conversation with companies that can take you 6 to 12 months to speak to the decision maker. And then, it doesn't work out and you just lost 1 year of your time. Sales cycles with large accounts are super long, can take up to 2 years. And I think to a startup that is starting or maybe in its early stage is really a bad approach. But there's 2 nuances to that. I don't recommend it. However, you have now, and by the way, I'm based in Europe, right? You have a large vision now from large companies to test each, quickly startup solution. And you even have regulations that are changing in Germany, for instance. So big companies can do it quicker and don't need to go through a heavyweight process to just purchase your solution, right? Because you had before purchase order regulation and so on. So they're changing the laws at the moment, right now as we're talking, so they can do it very quickly with startups. I highly encourage startups to work with companies that have a process. In Germany, we call it venture clienting, that have units that are responsible to find you and quickly test you, that with business units. And people are responsible to do that. And I think when a big company or client has this kind of units, this can be much easier for you than trying to target old school ones that have no processes, no incentive, no intention to work with startups. And I think so. That's why two advice: one, try to avoid big companies. But if you really want and you need it part of your business model, whatever, target the companies that actually have a process to engage with startups. And I'm going to cite some companies here because reports are published about the companies that are working the most with startups. And I'm just giving you the top most active partner in Europe. You have Siemens, Daimler, BMW, Samsung, Bosch, Volkswagen, Unilever, Loreal, Accenture, right? And they are the one that have a process, but you're going to find hundreds that don't have. So don't waste your time with them.
This is amazing. This is a super insightful and fresh perspective on this thing. I would build on that and say that, I mean, if the reports are being published, definitely do your due diligence when looking for partners. Don't, as Mikel has said, don't just go for the names that you've been familiar with for the past 20 years. Again, let's not name any names, but I think we know what we're talking about here. Research in the moment. Who is top of the field in partnering with startups? Don't sit there just guessing who do I need to work with. Proactively search who wants to work with me, and you will find it, because companies, larger companies, are now realizing the value of these approaches and are willing to work with you.
I want to add that it is very valuable insight because it might be a little bit counterintuitive that you don't have to pay attention to the bigger players and concentrate on your peers, if I may say so. And what other common pitfalls that startups can experience while partnering with other companies?
Yes, and this is actually a very important point of this podcast, I guess, because according to several sources, I couldn't find one particularly, but we are talking about 40 to 70% of partnership failure, right? And one of the professor at Northwestern Kellogg was saying that this is because of, let's say, four main reasons. Well, number one, you have environmental reasons. A partnership can fail based on, I don't know, a change in the world, right? COVID, for instance, or a political change that can force companies to stop some of the project. A second type of failure is strategic reasons. Internally, they just decide, for instance, I mean, you have a typical example. BMW wanted to purchase or do a partnership with Northvolt in Germany for batteries. They just canceled a $2 billion order because people don't buy EVs, right? So they have to change the strategy and deprioritize projects. So that can fail. A third one, structural reasons. The governance, as we said, was not properly set. There was some annoyance around the partnerships that made it fail. The planning was not good. Last one, you have the soft factors, behavioral reasons. And I'm a big believer that this is the most important one. I think the partnership manager, alliance manager, whatever you name it, you have to, it's a lot of relationship, to advance this partnership, especially because it's like two different worlds that you have to merge into one for a specific amount of time. It's a lot of trust, a lot of communication, a lot of updates, a lot of, there must be this kind of constant motivation to keep that partnership alive. And you have a lot of operational element that you can add to it, right? Partner program with tier-based, point-based, rewards, recognition, marketing, a lot of things you can do. But this is actually the role of the partnership manager to implement all of that. So that's a big one. So that's kind of the failure that I think we have to see. But two things that I also saw in the reports is that partnership leaders struggle to achieve their KPIs. And the statistic is that only 35%, so 75% of the team hit quotas, which is, if you think about it, massive amount of partnership leaders. And this is from the partnership leaders report. That means no one is hitting their quotas. Like, who sets the KPI? There is a problem here. So you have the wrong KPI. You either don't measure it or you just set the wrong one, right? So it's very important to set the right ones, and very important to measure and track, because otherwise you don't get the resources. You cannot build a team. People get fired, and it's a disaster. And I think that's what the industry is currently changing and trying to improve. And this is why the community partnership leaders is creating a lot of awareness to have chief partnership officer to have the right KPI in the first place. And I think that's what we want. But the second thing that I want to highlight is the lack of awareness of our what we are doing, right? I think everyone in the partnership industry will face stakeholders that they just no clue what we're doing. They don't understand what we're doing. We are not doing sales. We're not doing marketing. We're doing partnership. What does that mean, right? So there's a lot of education that we have to do, and I think it's a big part of the failure right now of this role and the partnerships that we're talking about.
By the way, to educate is the primary aim of our podcast, because we want more people in the business world to understand what is partnership and to help the business grow.
For sure. I think what I would add to that as well is that just riffing off of what you said is that it's super important also to be hiring into the role people with maybe not even so much the relevant experience, because not everybody has 30 years of experience in partnerships, but definitely people with the right kind of mindset, no matter their background. Looking out for that mindset so that you have a match between everything you said, setting the right KPIs, but also for the right kind of people. I think that's super important. But anyway, that's super insightful. Well, we're getting close towards the end. We have just a couple more things. Maybe one last big question. What are your final words of advice? Top couple of tips you would give to startups that are considering strategic partnerships?
Here, I'm going to dive into what I'm really passionate about, because when we are thinking about how to build partnership, I do believe process is the most important. But at the end of the day, I'm right now, spreading across Europe and different locations, 4 main pillars to build networks. This is what I mean, right? I believe the future is about partnership. All the data are showing that it is the way, and it's because we have the speed of technology and that is going, faster and faster. So you need to partner. But there is also the rise of startups, more and more startups, nimble. They can have a lot of cash from VCs. They can be faster than you. And also the political environment that is favoring, this kind of stakeholder economy, collaboration, and so on. And to build this partnership, to build these networks, I really believe that mindset and relationship is like a big, big, big one missing, right? We have to think that we were above before in a shareholder economy, taker mentality. Adam Grant is saying there's 75% of taker in the corporate workforce. So we need to shift the mindset, right? We need to go away from, protecting to giving and opening up. So that's the one pillar. The second pillar, I do think actually that more people should use AI and tools to increase their tracking, increase, to understand and analyze partners in a more automated way and not full of bias because it's their friend. I think this is extremely relevant and that will help them make more successful. The third pillar is I really believe that joining communities, associations, finding this third party of trust can be amazing, because when you get an introduction from one of these third parties, we talked about partnership leaders, but maybe you are a quantum startup and then you go into this quantum community of Munich or Paris or London. If you're part of it and people know you, they recommend you and they make you a warm intro, you have a much higher chance to achieve a constructive discussion very fast with that other stakeholders than if you're trying to go out by yourself, right? So joining communities, networking events, participating, being a member is, I think, highly relevant. And last but not least, I do think it's education and training. 2%, as I said, the business model 2020, we're going to 25%. The industry is transforming. A lot of processes are there, but actually are not mature. No one knows them. So it's about joining this where you can learn it, apply it, and iterate on it, because nothing is fixed in stone. So I would say that's my final piece of advice is 4 pillars: mindset, communication, AI and tools, joining communities, and education and training.
Man, that was absolutely brilliant. I must say that wouldn't have been an episode of anything in 2024 if we didn't mention AI. So I'm very glad that we did. But I do agree, and like, don't think of it about as something exotic. Like, if you think about the other 3 pillars that Mikel has just referenced, and they seem very human and relevant to you, so is this. It's not about reaching for some quantum singularity out there. This is just using the tools for the job that are emerging right now. Just like we were talking about PRMs that were not a thing 10 years ago. Well, now there was Gen AI. Now it is. So don't be afraid. Try it out, and it can definitely help you, especially if you're just starting out. With that, I think we're going to give Mikel a huge round of thanks, and also make sure that you check out today's superpower, Building Networks, 7 Mindset Principles to Thrive in a Fast-Changing World by Mikel Mangold. Find it in all your favorite bookshops, online or offline. With that, Marina?
Mikel, thanks again for joining us on the Tech Alliance podcast. And it was a pleasure talking to you. And a big thanks to our listeners for tuning in today.
Yeah, the pleasure was mine, and let's empower everyone to make better partnerships for a better world.
So please subscribe, find us wherever you get your podcasts from. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube and LinkedIn to stay tuned. I've been Andre
And Marina, and catch you next time on The Tap.